From the good, the decidedly weird, and now there's even something that's new to me. I bought a Sinden Lightgun because, well, I only have one CRT and it's living in borrowed time. Whoa there. What do you mean borrowed time? Yes, all CRTs are on borrowed time. And thank you no one for asking such a timely question. But before giving a straight answer, follow along on the screen while I'm yabbering on. See how many light guns you can remember. There will be an imaginary quiz later. As for the answer to no one, well, as you no doubt already know due to calendars existing, this isn't the 90s and we no longer know how to make a proper CRT, or any at all. What's that, no one? Another question? If I know that the last one isn't actually a light gun? Yes, of course I know. And neither is the Sinden, but I count them, because House of the Dead. Is that an answer? Well, at least I think so. As for a more technical answer, a true light gun is tied to the way a CRT draws its picture. The PS3 Move controller, as well as the Sinden, instead rely on a camera to determine its position. Although they do that in different ways, the result is just about the same. Good enough in terms of working, but compared to the old ways, I never quite get the feeling that they achieve the same level of accuracy. However, those are the limitations that we live with today. As for a plug-and-play solution that you pick up for a bit of fun, this isn't it. This takes work, and you need to invest a bit of time in order to get things to work just right. But we'll get to all that in due time. So instead, let's just concentrate on getting the box open. As for what's in the box, I assume it's one of the later production models, as it has more buttons than were shown on the initial Kickstarter back in 2019. I guess I could have checked the comments and updates on the Kickstarter, but I didn't pack it, so I couldn't say what's in the hidden updates. And why wasn't I a backer, since I have all of those light guns? I could guess, but probably I had already overspent on vintage computer games and all that stuff, and probably a mortgage. As for the gun itself, first impression is very good, though for someone with large hands such as me, there are some molded details that I would have wanted to see gone, mainly those that on a real gun would have been a safety or magazine release. Pointing the gun at your own face, as one never should, you can see the camera lens inside it. As for the sights, they're functional, though I would prefer to add a bit of paint to it in order to see better in the dark. According to the description, you should be able to use the gun in a normally lit room, but I use what I have, a dark and gloomy basement. Also, it's cold and probably haunted. By me. Anyway, as for the weight, it's quite substantial, at least compared to my other light guns, no doubt due to the solenoid making up the recoil function, compared to one of the two arcade games that I've played in my life, one of them being Lethal Enforcers, and that was, well, almost 3 decades ago. So if you pointed a light gun at me and told me to compare them, then I'd say this is slightly lighter. As for the original Enforcer's handgun, most of that weight may have been a security train. As for my previous setup, using the Justifier, you could also make a case for it being quite a step closer to my original experience. If you recall, this is what the Mega Drive version looked like. Granted, you'd be playing it on a CRT, so I wouldn't fault them for not looking great on a modern TV screen. And with that, it's time to pack away one of these guns. Now, all of this decidedly fun stuff wasn't where I started. Where I actually started was naturally the Getting Started guide for the Sinden Lightgun, which is where I definitely don't recommend that you start, but more on that later. As for the process, just download the installation package from their homepage, unzip it and set aside for later. The driver is somewhere in there, but as I have the internet in a tiny little box under my desk, I'll just plug the thing in and let good old Bill Gates sort it out from there. Now we have a serial device, another mouse, as well as an extra camera. And, oh look, another, because I wasn't done. Getting back to things, you can probably guess how this thing works just from that list alone. We just need a program to interpret the video. So, let's start it. Ignoring all things marked important, and let's just start the thing. What's the worst that could happen? Nothing bad, except that it's now a malfunctioning mouse. So I spent half a minute in order to actually hit the stop button. With the first step out of the way, basically verifying that everything works, we can continue with the guide, which tells you to hit Alt-B in order to add the white border that the gun is dependent upon to actually function. Switch to the configuration tab to see what the camera sees. The blue bit is what it thinks is the screen. Happy with my life choices, I started it up again, and again we're jumping all over the place. We don't see much of the blue, but this time it's because I'm too close to the screen and so it can't see the entire border. Moving further back, the accuracy improves significantly. We do, however, have a very tiny cone of movement. It also becomes evident that we have a dim display, so we need to bump up the brightness. Though, if you want it darker, then that's on you. As for just getting in there and playing some games, I picked Lethal Enforcers, of course. While there's little breadcrumbs everywhere as to how to get MAME working, in the end it was just a plain frustrating experience, and I was prepared to sell the whole thing on to the next person. Okay, so I thought, just let me play something, anything. Next option though is to download the suggested demo of a game called Dead Containment. Basically it's what you get if you try to cross House of the Dead with, well, Minecraft. I'm sure it's a fine game, but it didn't feel right. Took me a while to put a finger on why it felt like that. Then I realized it's basically the same as playing with any regular mouse. Instead of actively aiming at the screen, you're awkwardly dragging around a cursor that's not quite matching your movement. Looking around for a solution and trying to figure out if there was something I had ignored somewhere along the start of the program, I think I narrowed it down to the OS doing things. Basically all of the options trying to make your daily browsing experience jitter-free is making small changes to the movement. Then there's limits on mouse updates, mouse acceleration and all of that good stuff. Digging slightly deeper and looking at all of the suggestions, in the end I just went, nope. Maybe if I had purpose-built this machine to specifically be an arcade machine, but this is my main machine. I need everything working like it's supposed to. Yeah, so far it may seem like I'm a disgruntled customer. Far from it, because all I needed was a known working setup that could be easily replicated. Sounds like a job for Raspberry Pi, and this is definitely where I should have started. This is a Pi 400, a slightly faster Pi 4 with a built-in keyboard. As for the image, it's called Barebones, and you can find it as part of the wiki. It comes with configurations for known working titles, so we don't have to do all of the heavy lifting. With the file downloaded, extract it using 7-zip so that we can finally look into getting it on a memory card. I use Win32 disk imager for this, though you may prefer to use something else. It does format things, so pay attention. Yes, please destroy all of it. Once all that completes, you're going to see a bunch of scary stuff. That's just Microsoft freaking out over a little competition, so don't let it format it all over again. As this is a Pi 400, I'm going to overclock it slightly by editing config.txt. It's on the boot partition. With that done, keep ignoring any errors if you find them, and then safely eject the memory card. Just plug it into your Pi 400 and then prepare for your first boot, which for some reason will tend to hang here until you hit Ctrl-Alt-Delete. After that, it boots into emulation station and we can finish setting up our first controller. I'm using a keyboard as I have one physically bolted onto my Pi. It's a Pi 400 after all. There's not much here, but we can run Raspberry config to set up the system. First thing to start with is the VLAN region. Under advanced options, I also chose to expand the file system in order to see the entire card. Finish out of the menu and reboot as instructed. Go into RetroPie again and select Wi-Fi to set it up. Connect to Wi-Fi and then enter your Wi-Fi details, like you've been doing on yours and everybody else's devices for, well, 2 decades. Back in the menu, we can look at getting the gun to work. For that, we need to use the Sinden menu a lot. Usually first by starting all guns, then you get the menu again. As this is our first attempt, we need to calibrate the gun. Make sure that the camera on the gun is actually looking at the screen while you start it. If you didn't, then it'll immediately stop again. On my second attempt, it finally worked. Aim directly at the center and hold the down button for 3 seconds to make that the new center. One thing to note is that the calibration will stop the service, so we have to start the guns all over again. The services aren't very stable, so you'd better get used to stopping all guns and then starting all guns before starting a new game. Speaking of games, we don't have any. With the network name RetroPie, some shares should now be available to us. If you get asked for a username and password, then it's Pi and Raspberry. The directory structure expected for the BIOS as well as the ROMs share is already there. The files to go in them are not. I couldn't tell you where to find an archived version of the Sinden Barebones ROM pack, but the contents themselves are just moved across. The BIOSes are used for each of the various emulators. ROMs are moved across the same way, except they have their own folder for each emulator, and all of the Lightgun games are placed in the Lightgun games folder. Back at RetroPie, you need to restart the emulation station for it to see the games we added. With the RetroPie back up again, we need to start the Lightgun as well. Note the different options for recoil. As for games, there's one I always need to start with. Oops. This button is coin, and the other side is reload.
Player 1.
Such a great game, but let's move on. And as mentioned, we need to stop all light guns and then start it again before we can start any other games, such as
The House of the Dead.
Please How could anyone do this? Harry and Amy are coming to back us up.
And since we're done with that, just remember to stop and start again. Check out the wiki for a compatibility list, because you unfortunately won't be playing everything on a Pi. As for conclusions, it's that nothing is really as plug and play as you want it to be. As to whether you'll like the Sinden, it's going to depend highly on where you start using it. After spending the time, I've grown to appreciate it, though I will need something better than a Pi 400. But what I'm really saying is that now that I have Lethal Enforcers, I need it to play Virtual Cop. Maybe someday, but not on this setup. And I forgot the quiz.
March along, sing a song with the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory.
But if you made it this far, you'll probably pass. So, what do I really think? It's great. You should get one. If you like light gun games and have plenty of time. Just needs more cowbell. Well, then that's it for the moment. Bye.